So I just finished probably a week ago Black Science, and I wrote down a little bit of my review of Black Science just to give some people who have never read it or people who might be interested in reading it my experience as I went through the journey that was the Black Science universe. So Black Science starts out as a brilliant multiverse story where you're kind of not really sure what's going on. You're kind of just learning the characters, and I feel like that's pretty common for most stories. Is you got to figure out where you are, how you're established, what's going on, who are these characters, how do they all fit together. Um, and the focus early on was around one Grant McKay and his family, and he develops this thing called the pillar that allows them to jump worlds or jump dimensions. And the company that he works for that developed this is had him develop it in hopes that they would be able to connect with other dimensions where they have solved some of the things that this world is struggling with, like energy and cures for diseases that they don't have. And that was the main hope of developing this pillar science so that they could jump to these dimensions and make those connections and so on and so forth. But in doing that, Grant McKay accidentally was just like showing his family before the big reveal to everybody else, and he ended up jumping to a place with his family and a couple other people from the lab that he was working at to these dimensions, and that's where everything just kind of starts spiraling out of control. And for the most part, I think early on it did a really good job of keeping you invested, getting you used to these new worlds, and it kept it exciting. And the world building was really well done, and every new dimension felt like a purpose and like something like you hadn't really thought about before if you did, jump to new dimensions. And one of the problems with the pillar that he develops is it gets broken at some point. I don't know if that was in the first jump, or I don't really remember that early on, but it got broken, and now they can't jump to where they want to go to. They're just jumping to wherever it will jump to escape whatever situation they find themselves in this world, until they ultimately can fix it and then get back to their world. That is the main vibe of the story, and the themes keep expanding with every jump. The story keeps evolving. You end up losing some of the people that you jump with initially. They die in really weird situations. And then you kind of get like this world just keeps growing as you go. You see like there's more Grant McKays, and they all have developed this thing. And then they come because they lost like their family. So now they're trying to steal his family so that they can be back with their family. And it just becomes a very convoluted story. And it almost becomes to a point where it's hard to follow. And I would say around that 70% mark, I kind of started losing interest in the story as a whole. And because this is my first comic, I felt like I needed to finish it, right? And because it was so convoluted, I wanted to see how they ended this whole thing. Because it was so expansive, I really wanted to get to the end to see how it was expanding. And I will say, up until that point, I was probably at like a 8, 9 out of 10 in how this world was all coming together. I do think that there was a lot of plays on the simulation theory that I wasn't necessarily expecting, right? Because you do this multi-dimensional chaos starting off, and then you end up going to the quote-unquote base reality. And in that base reality, they're all just wearing VR headsets and living multiple lives, and that's how all these different dimensions are created, because those people in the base dimension can live multiple lives a day, and it's kind of like their entertainment, it's their TV, it's their way to expand or make it seem like they can live a lot longer without actually living longer, because each time they put on the headset, they get to live a whole life from start to finish. They get to experience being a kid to dying and being an adult, and then they start over again. In their reality, it takes about 20 minutes. In our reality, it takes a whole lifetime. So, or in each different reality, it takes about a whole lifetime. So, and they're all connected through various different ones, and you have like the Grant McKay guy is like the Grant McKay guy in every single one. I think I that part got extremely convoluted, and the fact that the base race was like lizard or like serpent characters, and yet every reality they were humans is kind of weird to me as well. And that's where it started to lose some of its appeal. I will say there were a couple characters that I would like to see spin-offs of. The first is Nate and Krolar. I just been saying Krolar the whole time. I don't know what the troll's name that he works with. Nate is kind of like a is one of Grant McKay's kids, um, and he gets lost early on in the book, and then when you find him later, he was hanging out with some like superhero team, and he's he got lost with this Korlor troll thing from one of the dimensions earlier on. And then they kind of work together as a dynamic duo, where Korlor is like the one that really has all the superpowers, but Nate is the one that has the brains, and they just kind of work together. And I thought that there was a lot of potential for that to be like a funny dynamic book. It felt like a fresh story once we got to learning about what happened to Nate in those lost couple of years while we were following Grant around trying to get back to his kids. And I think that has a lot of potential to be a pretty cool spin-off story that is different from the main story, is to see what happened in those years, some of the adventures they went on in the verse that they were, some of the bad guys they fought, all those things would be super interesting to follow along with. Um, and then back to like the main story. Once we got to like the lizard people, like you kind of get a hint of what of these people watching you throughout, and you don't really know what's going on or why they're important or what exactly you're doing. I did think that it got to a point where it was like overwritten. Like there was a lot of unfinished storylines that I felt like didn't need to be unfinished. Like you could have at least finished them in some aspect. There's a whole world that the daughter is becomes a princess at, that you hear of only when Grant ends up at that world, and then meets the ultimate villain at the end. In the witch that is Doxtra. Again, this is just how I read the names. I don't know the real pronunciation, but Doxtra is like this evil witch lady that takes Grant McKay's like genius away from him in so he can like trade. Like everything's built on like a bartering system. Like everything has to do with like the evil people always are in some way, shape, or form some type of business person. So you have like Grant McKay, who's not who's like the main hero, but sometimes his decision making causes bad things to happen, and he ultimately like breaks stuff, and then he tries to fix it, and then breaks stuff more, and then tries to fix it. And it's like his overconfidence, his selfish obsession, leads to all of these things going haywire, even though he has the right intentions of fixing everything and getting things back to how they were or how they should be. He ultimately just ends up being his own worst enemy throughout the whole series. And I think that was fine as far as like a main character goes. I thought I liked the duality of that. But then you had Kadar, who is like a credit hungry, ego first guy who is kind of jealous of Grant, and was like in a relationship with Grant's wife before Grant and his wife got I think it's Sarah. Grant and Sarah got married and had kids. So he's kind of like jealous of his family, but then also he's like not as smart as Grant either. So he's kind of jealous of Grant's smarts and genius. But he also wants to take credit for everybody else's work. He worked at the same company, and he was kind of like leading the projects, and he was the reason why Grant got hired, I believe. And there's just like a lot of weird things, and it's like this like kind of corporate greedy guy who wants to take the credit for everybody else's, but doesn't know how to do anything scientifically himself, until the end, where he's randomly able to build this machine that escapes the Eververse, but that's not really ever explained where he learned or I guess his backstory is never really explained if he actually knows anything scientific wise. He just kind of seems like he's a destroyer or like the main villain for most of it, and then at the end he was able to do that, and then at the end, he was also able to somehow stop Doxtra, which is never really explained if that's true at all. And next you had Mr. Block, which is like Block is the company that owns all of this technology and is paying Grant to develop it so that they can do all this stuff. And he's kind of like purely profit focused, like trying to not only control his company, but also his company on all of the dimensions that they go to, all of the different universes they go to. And he's kind of just like a big corporate slimeball. He meets himself in other different forms, and he, screws over those guys, tries to talk them into something, and then as soon as they get like a false, confidence that they're gonna work together, it's like, no, he really wants it all for himself. So it's just kind of a lot of corporate greed. And then back to Doxtra, she's a witch, right? But her witch is all on like a bartering system. This is what I was kind of getting to earlier. Is like in order for them to escape the world that Pia, his daughter, Grant's daughter, was the queen of, so they could find the mother and the brother and all this stuff. In order for them to escape that world and to fix things on that world, they needed this like creature's heart that she had as part of her magic stuff. And in order to get it, she made deals with people to get it. So like, hey, I'll give you this heart. You have to give me your genius. So she took Grant's genius away. Grant gave her the genius, and then he got the heart. Then they fixed this, and now he's not as smart as he used to be. Going into it, and then she just keeps bartering with more people until ultimately she's super super powerful and controls a lot of valuable magic and whatever. I don't understand how she became like the evil villain at the end. When I tell you the ending was so like this book, I did a really good job of following along for 70% of it, and it was all over the place. I was like, oh, this is really interesting the way they're weaving this all together. It's really cool. It's building up to this big cool ending, and then at the ending, it's just like, why is Doxtra the super bad villain? How did she escape her dimension? She didn't even have like a pillar, or like they never really explain how she's able to jump dimensions. Just like she's just there one time when they jump somewhere random. And then at the end, it's like you're seeing two different. You're seeing two different like versions of Grant. One where he's stuck in this loop where he's just living under that Kadar's rule. He kind of made everything perfect in his life and it perfect in Grant's life, but it's all kind of ruled by Kadar, so it's not doesn't feel perfect to Grant. And then you see the other one where Grant, goes and tries to kill Kadar, and it's in the same universe, but he like snaps and tries to go kill everybody and escape again, and you never really see where it all ends or which one's real. And it's just kind of like, why did I read this whole book to not at least get some type of an ending that made sense? And maybe the plan is to have a second like run of issues to explain what was all going on, but I felt like it became too big and there was too many ideas and it was too hard to actually end any proper way, that and they just wanted to move on to something else. And I feel like that is kind of the corner that this story went, is like it could have been really cool and it was really cool for a large portion of it, and then it just became too convoluted to where it's like, where are we even going with this? Some of the stuff that we talked about that seemed super important at the beginning isn't even mentioned here at the end. And then the whole unit, then everything got erased except for their universe, and then they restarted the whole thing. I don't know, it was just a little bit too much for me personally with the ending. So my final verdict is like a 6.8 out of 10. And like I said, it started off really strong in the eights and nine out of tens range, and then it kind of ended in the 6.8 range because I just felt lost. I felt like I just wasted my time reading this book when it had so much potential, and they almost like overdid the things that they like were doing throughout, and they didn't really planned to end it, and then they were like, oh wait, we have to end this. Everything vanished, everything's back, new world restarts. Okay, good. Let's call it good. Move on with our lives, and that's fine if you're gonna do it. It just, as a reader, it felt like, why did I even waste the time to read this in the first place? So, hopefully that review makes sense. Let me know if you guys had the same experience reading this, or if you guys had a completely different experience reading this. And I know I kind of jumped all around when I was talking about it, just because there was so much craziness happening. And maybe that was like the whole thing, is like there was always like this lingering like feeling that kind of like it was trying to like tell you life is basically what you make of it, and you can choose to either live in like a chaos where nothing's ever going right, or you can choose to accept life as what it is and just enjoy the small moments in life. Like, I don't know if that's what they wanted you to take from the book, but that is where I ended up. Again, maybe I overthought everything. Maybe I'm completely lost and I just am dumb and can't comprehend the book and how deep and awesome it was. But I feel like there was no emotional payoff, and there was too many questions that went unanswered at the end that just didn't make it an enjoyable ending to me. With that being said, hopefully you guys have a good rest of your day, and until the next one, love you guys. Peace.
Comic Book Corner. Turn the page, explore. Heroes rise while villains scheme. The hero falls, the city screams.